Hey guys, welcome into the 14. My name's Nick Cole, and it's week 3 in the SEC, and we're breaking down each game from a betting perspective. Today, we're talking about Central Michigan visiting LSU on Saturday night in Baton Rouge at Tiger Stadium. There's a 7:30 p.m. kickoff Eastern, and the game's going to be televised on SEC Network. The line for this game opened at LSU minus 21, and it has since moved down to LSU minus 19 at the time we're recording this video. The over-under opened at 58.5 and has moved up to 61. I'm going to bring in our betting analyst, Christopher Smith. Christopher, what do you think about those tweaks in the over-under and the spread on this game?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just interested to see Ed Orgeron and the saga that is LSU football. And I believe we got another former SEC coach, if I'm not mistaken, with the Chippewas as well. So interesting personalities, and we'll see the ongoing saga that is LSU and Baton Rouge this year will be fun to watch. But why don't you get into that a little bit with Nick's news and notes and tell us what's going on around the LSU program entering this week?
Sure. So first, let's talk about the weather for Saturday night. It's actually pretty similar to some of the forecasts we've seen throughout the league. I guess we've got a similar weather pattern blowing through the southeast here. We've got mid-70s around kickoff for temperature, and about 50% chance of scattered thunderstorms throughout the night. So who knows what you're going to get? Like we say, sometimes rain doesn't matter all that much, but a lightning delay might, right? And so that's always a potential this time of year in this area of the country. Wind shouldn't be a factor. It's clocking about forecast about 5 to 7 miles an hour, so we should be well under the threshold there. Injuries in this game, however, some things are starting to stack up a little bit on LSU. Their starting right tackle and their best pass rusher are out for this game. Cameron Wire, the starting right tackle there, and then Ali Gay is out on the defensive line there. And maybe one of the things we'll get into just a little bit, but they're also going to be missing a 5-star running back based on some drama from this week as well. And I'll just keep going down this list. Obviously, Miles Brennan, their starting quarterback, that got hurt early in camp, still out, as well as defensive lineman Glenn Logan. Those guys are kind of indefinitely out. Starting left tackle is questionable. And if you remember, that's actually the backup for what was projected to be the backup coming into the season. They're starting left tackle from a year ago, transferred to Kentucky. So a little bit of depth issue there. Although they are getting back, they're starting right guard, Jason Hines. He's expected to play after missing some time. So a little bit of good news there at the end of a long list of LSU injuries. And on the other side, Central Michigan also has at least 5 offensive players that are considered questionable, including one of their key running backs, Kobe Lewis, who's been out indefinitely with an off-field thing. So maybe both of these teams won't be at 100%, but I'm still excited about this one because I think there's some intrigue both from a betting standpoint and just from a who wins this game type of standpoint. Could be. But first, let's get into some of the news and notes outside of the injuries. The first thing that we want to talk about is the headline that has covered most of the week for LSU. Is a little bit of a situation where they have a 5-star running back named John Emery, who they were hoping that they would get cleared to play, had some academic issues, hoping they get him cleared to play in time for the week 1 game against UCLA, which they ultimately lost, and he didn't play in. Didn't play last week, and the NCAA finally issued a ruling on Monday that ruled him ineligible for the entire 2021 season, which was a huge blow. You're losing a 5-star talent. I mean, obviously LSU usually isn't hurting for running backs, but still, that's a guy that was supposed to be special and they thought would be a big part of their offense this season. But as the week has gone on, some people are starting to wonder if they may actually get him back after all. The Athletic reported that immediately the Emery family went out, hired a lawyer, and they're pushing for this to be overturned based upon some hardships that he and his family have endured through the COVID-19 pandemic. It sounds like his stepfather had an extended hospitalization where he was sort of a near-death experience and is still sort of trying to work his way back to good health. And the lawyer believes that, hey, this kid actually endured that during the 2020 season, which is where they were talking about him being 3 credits short. So let's ease things up on him a little bit. He did what he was supposed to do in summer school. A lot of moving parts here. It depends on who you ask if it's actually something that NCAA will look at in time for him to play. But that's been what's going on around the program this week. And also, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this as well, but LSU is going to be without their running backs coach and all-time leading rusher, Kevin Falk, who unfortunately his 19-year-old daughter passed away suddenly on Monday. And I mean, that's just a crushing blow for the whole LSU family, but the Falk family specifically. We want to send out our best wishes and condolences. You never want to bury your kid, right? And it's just a terrible thing for Kevin Falk. But let's get back onto what's happening on the field with LSU. After that week 1 loss at UCLA, they came home, played McNeese in their season opener at Tiger Stadium, beat him 34-7. It was pretty ho-hum in my opinion. One thing that I think that you may want to talk about a little bit, Christopher, is their inability to run the ball like you would expect them to be able to against McNeese. We'll get into that a little bit deeper here in a minute. And the other thing I would point out before we get into getting in the nitty-gritty of betting, we learned that Central Michigan can hang with a mid to upper tier SEC program this season already. They played a week 1 game against Missouri, and sure, Missouri won that game 34-24. But if you watched that game, you saw that Central Michigan went blow for blow with them for the majority of the contest. And that's not to say that LSU isn't better than Missouri, but what we've seen from LSU so far this season and dating back into last season, I'm not sure they're a whole lot better. So when you get a team like Central Michigan, who kind of saw firsthand a couple of weeks ago that, hey, we can hang with this team, I'd watch out for them. And especially since their head coach is Jim McElwain, who actually missed that game against Missouri with an emergency surgery for appendicitis. He will be back, and he has a lot of experience coaching games in Tiger Stadium. So he should be able to have his team prepared for what the environment is going to be like, what needs to be done to make sure they don't lose control in a raucous Baton Rouge evening. Obviously, a lot of time as the Alabama offensive coordinator and also the Florida head coach. He's made several trips to Tiger Stadium. So, Christopher, all that thrown at you, what do you take from it from a betting standpoint, if anything at all?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, why are we not hearing Ed Orgeron's name being brought up on the list of coaching candidates at USC? I mean, he's coached there before.
It's true. You got me there. And we talk about James Franklin being brought up in that Auburn-Penn State game and maybe having an impact on that game. Ed Orgeron, actually, you could argue he got the LSU job because of the job that he did at USC, because he was viewed by many people as a failed head coach at Ole Miss, and was he ever going to get an opportunity again? And that USC performance as an interim for Lane Kiffin generated this chance at LSU that produced a national championship for the Tigers. Now I'm not so sure that some LSU fans wouldn't be okay with him taking that job. That's a different topic.
Yeah.
For a different day.
And you look at speaking of Orgeron, and he's a longtime defensive line coach, and LSU, they are missing Ali Gay, which you mentioned. He made 7.5 sacks last year. Was one of the better pass rushers in the SEC entering this season. But LSU has 3 other players with double-digit sacks through 2 games. And who do you think the victim of a lot of those sacks was? Well, it was Ed Orgeron's son, who's the quarterback at McNeese last week. Ruthless, going after your own son like that with your pass rush. But the quarterback at Central Michigan is Jacob Sermon. And against Missouri, he took not 1, not 2, but 9 sacks in that game. So even without Ali Gay, as much trouble as LSU has had figuring out what the heck they're doing in coverage, I would expect him to come after Sermon hard and expect him to go down early and often. We also know that 5-star freshman safety Sage Ryan, who LSU and Alabama were hotly competing for on the recruiting trail, he is expected to make his LSU debut. LSU still has got some pretty good cornerbacks over there in Eli Ricks and Derek Stingley. So I would expect Central Michigan to have a harder time of it on offense in this game. Now, if LSU continues to be out of place in coverage, or if their pass rush doesn't get home, maybe there's some explosive plays there. But on the other side, LSU only 4.2 yards against McNeese. And in terms of their rushing offense, 3.4 yards per carry against an FCS team. That's not going to get it done. You also have a CMU defense that had a preseason first team All MAC defender at all three levels of the defense. And of course, everybody remembers last year's season opener coming off of LSU's national title game against Mike Leach and Mississippi State. That was an embarrassing game for LSU. Guess who's on the schedule next week for LSU? Mississippi State. They might be looking ahead a little bit to that game. So you mentioned the offensive line, and they may get one or two people back this week, but that unit has been horrible. If there's one thing that LSU has done poorly this year, it's the offensive line. That's the biggest issue they've had. Everyone knows, I think by now, that Max Johnson is a little bit of a downgrade over Miles Brennan at quarterback. And he's one of those old school, like his dad, old school traditional pocket passer. He needs a clean pocket. He needs to be able to survey the field. He's not going to run the ball. And LSU can't run the ball at all. So they're relying on Max Johnson to hit on timing routes and be able to have time to throw. And their offensive line, even if they do get some healthy bodies this week, one thing you know about offensive line play is you need cohesion. You need to practice together. You need to, run out the same guys, a few weeks in a row, a few practices in a row. And that's just something LSU doesn't have right now. So they probably would need to hope for some big plays on defense and some short fields and a good start, because imagine what the crowd in Baton Rouge is going to sound like on Saturday if they fall behind to Central Michigan, or if it's a close game into the second half. And Ed Orgeron can probably feel his seat getting warmer and warmer as the seconds go along. But Nick, what we care about is, of course, who's going to get us to the betting window. So why don't you tell us who you're betting on in this game?
Yeah, so everything that you just said about LSU having trouble running the ball, LSU being limited throwing the ball with the quarterback that they have in place right now, makes me very scared to take an over 61 in this game. I think that LSU can win this game, should win this game, but I like the under 61. I don't know that we're going to see a bunch of points. And then if you're making me pick a side here, similarly following what scares me about LSU, I can't lay almost 3 touchdowns with that team right now, right? And so I'm going to take Central Michigan plus the 19. I wish I had access to a book early enough in the week where I could have got them plus 21. Obviously, the money is coming this direction here, but give me Central Michigan plus 19 and under 61. What about you?
Yeah, I just can't I can't not bet on LSU's offense to weigh almost 3 touchdowns against any decent group of 5 team in the country right now. So I think it's CMU or pass on the side. Personally, I'm going to pass with my own money. For the record on this show, give me CMU plus 19. I do like the under 61, actually a decent amount. And I don't know it's going to make my personal card to actually bet on this week, but certainly a game I would give strong consideration to if I didn't like so many other matchups this week. And I do think that you look at the pressure LSU can probably get on Central Michigan's quarterback, and you look at the offensive line issues that LSU is going to have, and you look at them looking ahead to Mississippi State next week, and maybe not wanting to show everything in this game, a game that Orgeron with his ego probably thinks they should be able to win without a problem. So yes, I'll go under 61, and I like that a decent amount. For Nick Cole, I'm Christopher Smith with the 14, and we'll talk to you next week.